I watched from backstage as Emma Chen, my sister's most hated rival, placed her fingers on the keys of the Steinway Grand. The opening notes of my composition filled the concert hall, each phrase a weapon I'd forged specifically for this moment. In the front row, my sister Vivian's face went white as she recognized fragments of melodies she'd heard me practice years ago, now transformed into something she could never touch, never claim, never play. My right arm throbbed with phantom pain, a permanent reminder of what she'd done to me 3 years ago on these very grounds. The standing ovation began before Emma even finished the final crescendo. I smiled from the shadows, watching Vivian's carefully constructed world collapse with each thunderous clap. She didn't know I was here. She didn't know I'd been pulling the strings for months. And she certainly didn't know that the girl whose career she'd destroyed was about to destroy hers right back. But I should start at the beginning, shouldn't I? The real beginning, not the dramatic moment where everything came together. Because you need to understand what she took from me. You need to understand why this revenge was so perfectly, exquisitely justified. I was 7 years old when I first touched a piano. My mother, Catherine Hartwell, had been a concert pianist before she married my father, a successful investment banker who believed music was a frivolous hobby but tolerated it in his household as long as it didn't interfere with real accomplishments. She'd given up her career for him, and the bitterness of that sacrifice had curdled inside her like spoiled milk. When Vivian was born 2 years before me, my mother saw a second chance. She would mold Vivian into the pianist she'd never become, the prodigy who would grace the world's greatest stages. From the moment Vivian could sit upright, she was at the piano. Private tutors, master classes, competitions. My mother poured everything into her. Then I came along, the unplanned second daughter, the inconvenience. I don't remember my mother ever holding me with warmth. My earliest memories are of being shuffled off to nannies and babysitters while she accompanied Vivian to rehearsals and recitals. My father barely acknowledged my existence except to occasionally ask my name as if he genuinely couldn't remember it. But when I was 7, something unexpected happened. I wandered into the music room while Vivian was at a competition and placed my small hands on the keys. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just mimicking what I'd seen my sister do 1,000 times. But something magical happened. The notes that came out weren't random. They formed a melody, simple but hauntingly beautiful. I played for hours, lost in a world where I finally felt like I belonged. My mother found me there at sunset. I expected her to be angry, to tell me to get away from Vivian's piano. Instead, she stood frozen in the doorway, her face unreadable. Played the melody I'd created, my child's fingers stumbling but earnest. "Play that again," she whispered. I did. She sat down beside me, and for the first time in my life, she looked at me. Really looked at me. "You have it," she said softly. "The gift I thought I'd only pass to Vivian. You have it too." For a brief, shining moment, I thought things would change. I thought I would finally matter to her. I was wrong. The next day, she hired a piano teacher for me. Mr. Bernard was kind but strict, a retired performer who recognized raw talent when he saw it. Within months, I was progressing at a rate that shocked everyone. My mother began attending my lessons, her eyes bright with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Vivian noticed immediately. She was 9 and already winning regional competitions, already the star of our family's universe. She didn't like sharing the spotlight. The psychological warfare started small. She'd accidentally spilled juice on my sheet music. She'd practiced during my lesson times, playing as loudly as possible in the adjacent room. She'd tell me my playing sounded like dying cats, and that I was embarrassing the family. I was 8 years old. I believed her, but Mr. Bernard didn't. "You have something special, Claire," he told me during one lesson. "Your sister is technically proficient, one of the best I've seen for her age, but you have soul. You feel the music. That's rarer than the perfect technique." Those words sustained me through the next few years as the abuse escalated. Because by the time I turned 10, Vivian realized I wasn't just her mother's pet project. I was a genuine threat. At 11, I won my first competition. It was a small local affair, nothing like the prestigious events Vivian competed in. But I won. My mother actually smiled at me. My father said, "Well done, Caroline." "Claire," I corrected softly. "Right, Claire." Vivian didn't speak to me for a week. When she finally did, It was to tell me that I'd won because the competition was for amateurs and no talents, that the judges had probably felt sorry for me, that I should quit while I was ahead because I'd never be as good as her. My mother said nothing to defend me. She never did. The pattern continued for years. I'd achieve something, and Vivian would find a way to diminish it or sabotage it. She convinced my mother to schedule our lessons back to back so I'd always hear her playing first, always be compared to her. So she'd leave articles about child prodigies on my bed with Vivian's name highlighted and mine conspicuously absent. She hacked my email and withdrew me from a competition I'd spent months preparing for, but I kept playing. Because when I was at the piano, I could escape. The music was mine, untouchable by her cruelty. By the time I was 15, I'd grown into my talent. I was winning competitions regularly now, sometimes even placing higher than Vivian. Mr. Bernard told me I had a real shot at getting into the Juilliard school if I continued at this trajectory. My mother's attention was now split between us, and I could see the calculations in her eyes. Which daughter would bring her more glory? Vivian saw it too, and she was terrified. The National Youth Piano Competition was the most prestigious event for young pianists in the country. Winners received full scholarships to elite music conservatories, performance opportunities with major orchestras, and almost guaranteed success in their musical careers. At 16, Vivian had won it the previous year. At 15, I'd placed third. This year, we were both competing again. I'd been preparing for months. I'd chosen Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most technically demanding and emotionally powerful pieces in the classical repertoire. Mr. Bernard and I had worked on it until my fingers bled, until I could play it in my sleep, until the music lived inside me like a second heartbeat. I was ready. For the first time in my life, I believed I could actually beat her. Vivian knew it too. I'd seen her at the practice rooms, watching me through the windows with an expression I couldn't quite read. Fear? Hatred? Something darker? The competition was held at the Westwood Performing Arts Center, a sprawling complex with multiple practice rooms, rehearsal halls, and a main stage that seated 2,000 people. We arrived 3 days early for rehearsals and preparation. My mother had rented rooms at a nearby hotel, and for once, she seemed focused on both of us equally. She was nervous, I realized. She'd invested so much in our musical careers, and this competition would determine which of us would be the true star. The day before the finals, I woke up at dawn to get extra practice time in one of the smaller rehearsal rooms. The building was nearly empty, just a few other competitors running through their pieces. I lost myself in the Rachmaninoff, feeling each note resonate through my body. This was it. This was my moment. I didn't hear Vivian come in. "You sound good," she said from the doorway. I jumped, my hands crashing discordantly on the keys. "God, Vivian, you scared me." "Sorry." She walked closer, her face arranged in an expression of sisterly concern I'd learned not to trust. "I just wanted to talk to you before tomorrow." "About what?" "About us." She sat down on the bench beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. "Claire, I know things have been difficult between us. I know I haven't always been the best sister." This was new. Vivian never admitted fault, never apologized. I felt a flutter of hope in my chest, stupid, naive hope. "I've been thinking," she continued, "about how competitive Mom has made us. It's not healthy. We shouldn't be enemies. We're sisters." "I don't want to be enemies either," I said carefully. "Good." She smiled, and for a moment she looked like a stranger wearing my sister's face. "So, I was thinking we could practice together, help each other. There's a piece I'm struggling with, and you always understand the emotional phrasing better than me. Could you show me? In my practice room? It has better acoustics than this one." Every instinct I had screamed at me to say no. But the desire to believe she'd changed, that we could finally be real sisters, overrode my caution. "Okay," I said. Her practice room was on the third floor at the end of a long hallway. The building was older in this section, scheduled for renovation. The windows were old-fashioned, the kind that swung outward on hinges, and the floors were original hardwood, beautiful but uneven. I'm working on the Chopin Ballade number 1, she said, sitting at the piano. The middle section. Can you show me how you'd phrase it? I stood beside her, watching her hands move across the keys. She played competently but without feeling. The notes technically correct but emotionally hollow. It's not bad, I said, but you need to think about the story you're telling. Chopin wrote this after Poland fell to Russia. It's about loss and longing. You need to feel that pain. Show me. I sat down beside her, squeezing onto the bench. As I started to play, demonstrating the phrasing, I felt her shift her weight. It happened so fast. Her shoulder slammed into mine with tremendous force, harder than should have been possible from that angle. The bench tipped. I fell backward, my arms pinwheeling for balance. My right hand caught the edge of the piano lid, and for a split second, I thought I'd steadied myself. Then Vivian's foot shot out, hooking around the bench leg. The bench toppled completely, and I went down hard, my right arm trapped between the piano and my falling body. The sound of my arm breaking was like a gunshot in the silent room. The pain was instantaneous and overwhelming, a white-hot supernova that obliterated everything else. I screamed, and then I couldn't scream anymore because I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except feel my entire world ending in that moment. Oh my God, Claire! Vivian's voice was perfect, shocked, horrified, concerned. Are you okay? What happened? And I looked up at her through tears of agony and our eyes met. For just a fraction of a second, her mask slipped. I saw satisfaction in her face, triumph. Then it was gone, replaced by sisterly panic as she ran to the door, screaming for help. The next hours were a blur. Paramedics, hospital, x-rays, surgery. My radius and ulna were both fractured, the bones shattered in multiple places. They had to put in pins and plates. The orthopedic surgeon was kind but honest. With physical therapy, I'd regain most of the use of my arm, but the fine motor control necessary for professional piano performance? That was unlikely. The damage was too severe. My mother cried. I thought at first she was crying for me, but then I heard her on the phone with my father. 15 years of lessons, thousands of dollars. All that potential, gone, just gone. How could she be so clumsy? Clumsy, that's what the official story became. I'd lost my balance, fallen awkwardly, an accident, a tragedy. Vivian had witnessed it all, had tried to catch me but couldn't. She was traumatized by the experience, according to my mother. I tried to tell them the truth. I tried to explain that Vivian had pushed me, had deliberately broken my arm, but I had no proof. It was my word against hers, and Vivian was the golden child, the star. Why would she sabotage her own sister? Claire, sweetheart, my mother said, her voice dripping with condescension. You're in shock. The pain medication is making you confused. Vivian would never do such a thing. She loves you. My father didn't even visit me in the hospital. He called once, asked if I was okay, and hung up before I could answer. The competition went on without me. Vivian won first place naturally. She dedicated her victory to me during her acceptance speech, saying how heartbroken she was that I couldn't compete, how she knew I would have been amazing. The audience gave her a standing ovation for her grace and sisterly love. I watched it on my laptop from my hospital bed, my right arm immobilized in a cast, heavy with pins and screws and shattered dreams. That's when something inside me broke in a way that had nothing to do with bones. Physical therapy was grueling. Every session was a reminder of what I'd lost, what Vivian had taken from me. My therapist, Mark, was relentlessly optimistic, but even he couldn't hide his concern as the weeks turned into months and my fine motor control remained compromised. You're making progress, Claire, he'd say, watching me struggle to pick up a pencil without dropping it. These things take time. But we both knew the truth. I'd never play piano professionally again. My dreams of Juilliard, of concert halls, of making music my life, all of it was gone, crushed under the weight of Vivian's ambition. I was 16 years old and my life was over. My mother stopped coming to my physical therapy appointments after the first month. She was too busy managing Vivian's burgeoning career. My sister had leveraged her competition win into a recording contract with a major classical music label. She had concerts scheduled across the country. She was the rising star everyone had predicted she'd be. I was the footnote, the cautionary tale. the sister who'd had so much promise until that tragic accident. Vivian never apologized, never even acknowledged what she'd done. She played the role of concerned sister perfectly whenever anyone was watching, but when we were alone, her contempt was palpable. "It's probably for the best," she told me once, 3 months after the competition. We were in the music room at home, her practicing for an upcoming concert while I sat in the corner, my arm still weak and painful. "You were good, Claire, but you were never going to be great. This way you don't have to face the disappointment of peaking early." I said nothing. I'd learned that arguing with her was pointless. And really, the world doesn't need another mediocre pianist. It needs excellence. It needs people like me. She played a perfect trill, her fingers dancing across the keys with the effortless precision I'd never have again. You should be grateful, actually. Now you can pursue something more realistic. Maybe you could be a piano teacher for children. That's still music adjacent. The pity in her voice was worse than her cruelty. I stopped going to the music room after that. I couldn't stand to hear her play, to be reminded of what I'd lost. Instead, I spent most of my time in my bedroom, supposedly doing homework, but really just existing in a gray fog of depression. My father noticed my absence from family dinners, not out of concern, but irritation. "You need to get over this, Carolyn," he said one evening. "Life is full of setbacks. Successful people adapt." "Claire?" I whispered. "What?" "My name is Claire." He waved his hand dismissively. "Whatever. The point is, you're wallowing. It's unseemly. Your sister has moved on from the trauma of watching you fall. You should too." My mother nodded in agreement. "Vivian has been so strong through all of this. She even asked if you'd like to come to her concert next month, as a gesture of support." "Support," I repeated flatly. "Yes, she wants you there. She wants to show that you're still part of this family, still part of her journey." A prop, I thought. She wants me there as a prop. The tragic sister whose accident makes her success seem even more precious by comparison. I didn't go to the concert, but I did start to realize something important. If I was going to survive this, if I was going to be anything other than the broken girl in the corner, I needed to find a new path. Not a consolation prize, not a backup plan, a real path, one that was mine alone. The problem was I had no idea what that path was. The answer came 6 months after my arm was broken, in the form of a MacBook Pro and a desperate need to escape my own head. I'd been scrolling through music forums, torturing myself by reading about young pianists making their debuts when I stumbled across a discussion about digital audio workstations, software for composing and producing music electronically. Someone posted a link to a free trial of Logic Pro, and on a whim, I downloaded it. At first, I didn't even know what I was doing. The interface was overwhelming, full of virtual instruments and effects and possibilities I didn't understand. But slowly, painstakingly, I began to teach myself. YouTube tutorials became my new masterclasses. Online forums became my new practice rooms, and something miraculous happened. I discovered I could still make music. My right hand would never have the precision to perform, but it could click a mouse. It could drag notes on a digital staff. It could trigger sounds and shape them into something beautiful. The music I created wasn't performed. It was composed, constructed, built from nothing but imagination and determination. For the first time since the accident, I felt alive. I started spending every free moment on my laptop, creating compositions. At first, they were simple, basic piano pieces that I played using MIDI keyboards and then edited until they were perfect. But as my skills grew, so did my ambition. I started incorporating orchestral elements, electronic sounds, experimental techniques that would be impossible to perform live. I was creating a new kind of music, something uniquely mine. And I was good at it. My family didn't notice at first. They were too absorbed in Vivian's career. My mother accompanied her to every concert, every interview, every photo shoot. My father attended the prestigious events, the ones where donors and industry people would see him. I was left alone, which was exactly what I needed. By the time I turned 17, I'd composed dozens of pieces. Some were classical in style, others were modern, a few were completely experimental. I started posting them online under a pseudonym, Melody Chen, a combination of my middle name and my mother's maiden name. I didn't want anyone connecting the music to me, to the tragic story of Claire Hartwell who'd lost her piano career. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People loved my music. They called it innovative, emotional, technically brilliant, but accessibly beautiful. Music bloggers started reviewing my compositions. Other musicians started reaching out, asking if they could perform my work. For the first time since the accident, I felt like myself again. Not the broken victim, not the lesser sister. Just Claire, the composer. But I kept it secret from my family. Some instinct told me that if they knew, they'd find a way to ruin this too. This was mine, and I needed to protect it. My senior year of high school was strange. On the surface, I was the quiet girl who'd had the tragic accident, the one people felt sorry for. I went to classes, got straight A's, and stayed invisible. But online, as Melody Chen, I was building a reputation. A small, independent record label reached out asking if I'd be interested in licensing my music for film and television. I said yes. Suddenly, my compositions were appearing in indie films, in commercials, in documentary soundtracks. The money wasn't huge, but it was real. I was a professional composer at 17. I opened a bank account my parents didn't know about and started saving everything I earned. I had a plan now: finish high school, get into a good university with a strong music composition program, and never depend on my family again. But fate had other plans. It was March of my senior year when Vivian made an announcement at family dinner. She was 18 now, already performing in major concert halls, already being called one of the most promising young pianists of her generation. My mother beamed at her like she'd personally created a deity. "I've been accepted to perform at the Westwood Annual Gala," Vivian said, her voice carefully modulated to sound humble but unable to hide her triumph. "It's one of the most prestigious events of the season. Every major critic and industry person will be there." "That's wonderful, darling," my mother exclaimed. "This could be your breakthrough moment." "There's more," Vivian continued, and now her eyes slid to me with an expression I recognized: malicious satisfaction. "The theme this year is New Generation Classical Heart. They want each performer to present something fresh, either a new composition or a radical reinterpretation of a classic piece." My stomach dropped. I knew where this was going. "I need something that will make me stand out," she said. "Something that proves I'm not just technically proficient, but artistically innovative." And I thought, she smiled at me, sweet as poison. "Claire, you used to compose little pieces, didn't you? Before the accident? Maybe you could write something for me. It would be like we're collaborating as sisters. Wouldn't that be beautiful?" The table went silent. My mother's eyes lit up with calculation. My father looked mildly interested for the first time in months. "Claire composes?" my mother asked. "Oh, just little things," Vivian said dismissively. "Nothing serious, but I thought it might be nice to include her in my success, given everything she's been through." A gesture of sisterly love. The manipulation was masterful. If I refused, I'd look petty and jealous. If I agreed, I'd be giving Vivian ammunition to further destroy my spirit. "I don't compose anymore," I said quietly. "But you could try," my mother pressed. "Vivian is giving you an opportunity to be part of something important. You should be grateful." Grateful, that word again. "I can't," I said, pushing back from the table. "I have homework." I left before anyone could argue, my hands shaking with suppressed rage. In my room, I pulled out my laptop and stared at my most recent composition. A piano concerto I'd been working on for months. Something passionate and complex and absolutely perfect. Vivian wanted a composition? Fine, she could have one. But it wouldn't be my best work. It would be something beautiful enough to fool her, but flawed in subtle ways only a real musician would notice. Let her perform my cast-offs while my real music lived elsewhere. I spent the next week creating what I called the Sister's Lament, a solo piano piece that sounded impressive but was technically a nightmare. The tempo changes were awkward, the key modulations were jarring, and the emotional through line was confused. To an amateur, it would sound sophisticated. To a professional, it would sound like the work of someone talented but undisciplined. I gave it to Vivian with a printed score and a polite smile. She looked at it for about 30 seconds. "This is interesting, but I don't think it's quite right for the gala. Too experimental. But thanks for trying, Claire. It's sweet that you're still interested in music." She never even played it. She hired a professional composer instead, someone with actual credentials, and performed his piece at the gala to great acclaim. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even hurt anymore. I was just done. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to succeed so completely, so undeniably, that Vivian would have to watch me surpass her. But I'd do it in a way she'd never see coming, in a sphere where she couldn't reach me until it was too late. I got into 3 universities with strong composition programs: Berkeley, NYU, and Boston Conservatory. I chose NYU because it was far from home and because their composition department had connections to every major music institution in the country. My parents were confused by my choice. "Why music composition?" my mother asked. "You can't perform anymore. Wouldn't something more practical make sense?" "I'm good at composition," I said simply, "and I can make a career of it." My father scoffed. "Composers don't make money unless they're dead and famous. You're wasting your time and my money." "I have scholarships," I told him. "And grants? I don't need your money." His face turned red. "Don't be ridiculous. Of course you need my money." "What scholarships?" I showed him the letters. Full ride to NYU, including housing, based on the strength of my portfolio. The portfolio I'd built as Melody Chen, though I didn't tell him that. The admissions committee had been blown away by my work, had called me one of the most exciting young composers they'd seen in years. My father didn't congratulate me. He just grunted and went back to his newspaper. My mother was more direct in her disappointment. "This is just you being stubborn," she said. "You can't accept that Vivian is the real musician in this family, so you're chasing after scraps." "It's sad, Claire." "Maybe," I said, "but they're my scraps." I left for New York that August without looking back. Vivian was on tour in Europe and didn't bother to come home to say goodbye. My parents drove me to the airport and dropped me at the curb without getting out of the car. "Good luck," my mother said, and it sounded like a dismissal. "Thanks," I replied, and meant it as goodbye. NYU was a revelation. Suddenly, I was surrounded by people who understood music the way I did, who valued composition as an art form, who didn't see me as the broken girl, but as a serious artist with real potential. My professors were brilliant and demanding. They pushed me to expand my boundaries, to experiment with forms and styles I'd never considered. I studied everyone from Bach to Bjork, from Mozart to Radiohead. I learned about music theory at a level that made my previous understanding seem childish. And I composed. God, I composed. I wrote pieces for string quartets and wind ensembles, experimental electronic works, and neoclassical piano concertos. I wrote music for short films and dance performances. I wrote until my good hand cramped and my eyes burned from staring at my computer screen. By my sophomore year, I'd won 2 major composition competitions and had my work performed by the NYU Symphony Orchestra. By my junior year, I had an agent and was getting commissions from established ensembles across the country. I was becoming someone, not Vivian's tragic sister, just Claire Hartwell, composer. But I still followed Vivian's career. I couldn't help myself. She was everywhere: concert halls, music magazines, social media, her face on posters, her name in reviews. She was undeniably talented, and the classical music world had crowned her their new darling. And she had a rival. Emma Chen burst onto the scene during my sophomore year at NYU. She was a Chinese-American pianist, just a year older than Vivian, with a completely different performance style. Where Vivian was precise and controlled, Emma was passionate and spontaneous. Where Vivian played with technical perfection, Emma played with soul. The classical music press loved pitting them against each other. Every competition they both entered became a battle. Every concert was compared. Their social media followers obsessed over who was better, who was more beautiful, who would have the better career. Vivian hated Emma with a passion that was almost unhinged. She posted passive-aggressive comments on social media, gave interviews where she subtly criticized Emma's undisciplined playing style, and allegedly tried to get Emma blacklisted from certain venues. I followed it all with detached amusement, until I saw Emma perform live. It was the spring of my junior year. Emma was giving a concert at Lincoln Center, and on a whim, I decided to attend. I sat in the back row, anonymous in the crowd, and watched her play Chopin's Piano Concerto No. 1. She was extraordinary. Not because her technique was flawless, it wasn't. She made small mistakes, missed notes that Vivian would never miss. But she played with such raw emotion, such genuine connection to the music that the technical imperfections became irrelevant. She made the audience feel every note, every phrase. She told a story with her playing that transcended mere performance. She played the way I used to dream of playing, the way Vivian never could. After the concert, I did something impulsive. I went backstage, talked my way past security by showing my NYU student ID and dropping my professor's name, and asked to speak with Emma. She was in her dressing room, still in her concert gown, looking exhausted but happy. When I introduced myself, not as Vivian's sister, just as Claire Hartwell, composition student, she lit up. Claire Hartwell, oh my God, I know your work. I performed your string quartet No. 3 last year in a chamber concert. It's brilliant. I was stunned. You know my music? Are you kidding? You're one of the most exciting young composers working right now. I've been hoping to meet you, actually. I'm looking for new repertoire, something contemporary but emotionally accessible. Would you ever consider writing something for piano? An idea began forming in my mind. A terrible, perfect idea. Actually, I said slowly, I've been working on a piano concerto. It's not finished yet, but if you're interested... I'm interested, she said immediately. Can I hear what you have so far? I pulled out my phone and played her a recording of the work in progress, a piece I'd been composing for over a year, one of the most technically demanding and emotionally powerful things I'd ever written. It was everything I'd wanted to play myself before Vivian destroyed that dream. Emma listened in silence, her eyes closed. When it ended, she opened her eyes and they were wet with tears. "That's beautiful," she whispered. It's like you reached into my chest and pulled out everything I feel when I play. I have to perform this. I need to perform this. There's something you should know, I said. My sister is Vivian Hartwell. Her expression shifted. The Vivian Hartwell, the pianist? Yes. You're her sister, the one who had the accident? Yes. She studied me for a long moment. Is this about her? Is that why you're offering me this piece? I could have lied. I could have said it was purely artistic, that I just appreciated her playing style. But something about Emma's directness made me want to be honest. Partially, I admitted. Vivian and I don't have a good relationship. She's done things to me that I can't forgive, and I know she hates you. She does, Emma said dryly. She once told a journalist that I play like a drunk elephant. That sounds like her. So this is revenge? You want to give me ammunition against your sister? No, I said, and realized it was true. I want to give you the best piece you've ever performed. The fact that it'll drive Vivian insane is just a bonus. You deserve great music, Emma, and I think we could create something special together. She thought about it for maybe 10 seconds. Okay, let's do it. We shook hands, and in that moment, I felt the last piece of my plan click into place. Over the next 6 months, Emma and I worked on the concerto together. She'd come to New York when her schedule allowed, and we'd spend hours at the piano in one of NYU's practice rooms, refining every phrase, every dynamic, every moment of the piece until it was perfect. It became more than just a concerto. It became the story of my life, the tragedy, the betrayal, the survival, the triumph. Every note was infused with everything Vivian had taken from me and everything I'd built in spite of her. I called it Phoenix Rising. Emma understood what it meant without me having to explain. She poured herself into learning it, practicing until her fingers bled until she could play it from memory with her eyes closed. She made it hers while still honoring everything I'd put into it. Meanwhile, Vivian's career continued its upward trajectory. She was signed to perform at the Westwood Annual Gala again, the same gala where she'd cemented her status as a prodigy years ago, the same venue where she'd broken my arm and destroyed my dreams. When Emma told me she'd been invited to perform at the same gala, I knew it was fate. They want a world premiere, she said. Something that'll make headlines. I told them I had the perfect piece. Phoenix Rising. Phoenix Rising, she confirmed. Claire, this is going to be the performance of my career. I can feel it. Good, I said, because it's going to be the end of Vivian's. She looked at me carefully. What did she do to you? You've never told me the whole story. So I did. I told her everything, the years of psychological abuse, the deliberate sabotage, the broken arm that ended my performance career. I told her about watching Vivian accept an award and dedicate it to me while I lay in a hospital bed, knowing she'd destroyed me on purpose. Emma's face went pale. Jesus Christ. Claire, that's attempted murder. I know. Did you ever tell anyone? Press charges? No one believed me. They all thought it was an accident. And by the time I realized no one would ever believe me, it was too late to do anything about it. But you could still, Keith. No, I said firmly. I don't want justice from the legal system. I want artistic justice. I want her to watch you perform my music and know that I've surpassed her in every way that matters. I want her to realize that breaking my arm didn't break me. It just freed me to become something better than she'll ever be. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. Let's destroy her. The months leading up to the gala were intense. Emma practiced D obsessively, and I refined every detail of the orchestration, working with the gala's orchestra to ensure they understood the emotional weight of each section. The piece was technically demanding for both soloist and orchestra. I'd made sure of that. It required not just skill, but genuine artistry, the kind of deep emotional connection that separated great performers from merely good ones. I also did something else. I started attending Vivian's concerts again, always sitting in the back where she'd never notice me. I studied her, playing with the cold, analytical eye of a composer rather than the wounded heart of a sister. And I noticed something I'd never seen before, something that would make my revenge even more perfect. Vivian had stopped growing as an artist. She was still technically flawless, still capable of playing the most demanding pieces without a single mistake. But there was no evolution in her interpretation, no deepening of understanding. She played everything the same way. She had 5 years ago, perfectly, precisely, and utterly without soul. She'd peaked and she didn't even know it. The critics were starting to notice. Reviews that had once been glowing were now polite but unenthusiastic. Words like competent and professional replaced brilliant and transcendent. She was becoming reliable rather than remarkable, and in the world of classical music, reliable was death. Emma, meanwhile, was ascending. Every performance showed growth, showed her pushing boundaries and taking risks. She was becoming the artist Vivian pretended to be, and she was about to perform my concerto at the most important gala of the season. I didn't tell my family I'd be attending. I hadn't spoken to them in months beyond the occasional perfunctory text message. As far as they knew, I was still at NYU, still pursuing my little hobby of composition while Vivian conquered the music world. They had no idea I'd become Melody Chen. No idea my compositions were being performed by major orchestras across the country. No idea I was making more money from my music than most classical performers ever would. I'd built a life they knew nothing about, and I intended to keep it that way until the moment of maximum impact. That moment was now. The night of the gala, I arrived early and anonymous. I'd cut my hair short and dyed it a dark auburn, a look so different from the long brown hair I'd had in high school that even my own family wouldn't recognize me at a glance. I wore a simple black dress, professional but unmemorable, and sat in the back of the auditorium where I could see everything. The Westwood Performing Arts Center looked exactly as I remembered it. The same grand lobby, the same sweeping staircases, the same ornate concert hall. I hadn't been back since the day Vivian broke my arm 3 years ago. Being here again should have been traumatic, but instead I felt a strange calm. This was where she'd destroyed me. This was where I'd destroy her. The gala was a who's who of classical music royalty. Major critics, wealthy donors, representatives from record labels and performance venues, everyone who mattered was here. I recognized several of my professors from NYU in the audience, though they didn't recognize me. I saw my parents enter with Vivian, my mother fussing over Vivian's hair while my father checked his phone. bored as always. Vivian looked beautiful in a white gown that probably cost more than my entire semester's rent. She was smiling, gracious, accepting congratulations from people who approached her. She was supposed to perform second to last, one of the coveted spots in the program. Emma was performing last, the final, most prestigious position, the spot reserved for the piece that would leave the lasting impression. The first few performances were excellent, but unmemorable. A violin concerto, a chamber piece, a soprano performing Puccini. The audience applauded politely but without real enthusiasm. These were all established pieces by established performers, exactly what everyone expected from a classical gala. Then it was Vivian's turn. She'd chosen Beethoven's Appassionata Sonata, one of the most famous and technically demanding piano pieces ever written. It was a safe choice, a crowd pleaser, something she could play in her sleep, and she played it perfectly. Every note was exactly where it should be, every dynamic precisely controlled, every technical demand met with effortless skill. It was a textbook performance, the kind that music students would study to understand proper technique. It was also completely, devastatingly boring. I watched the audience's faces as she played. Appreciation but not excitement. Respect but not passion. A few people actually checked their phones during the slower middle section. The critics were taking notes with expressions that ranged from satisfied to slightly disappointed. When she finished, the applause was generous but not enthusiastic. A standing ovation from her parents and a few diehard fans, but most of the audience remained seated, clapping politely. I saw Vivian's smile falter for just a moment as she bowed, saw her eyes scan the crowd and register the lukewarm response. She knew. On some level, she had to know that she hadn't delivered the transcendent performance this venue demanded. The orchestra took a brief intermission to reset for the final piece. I stayed in my seat, my heart pounding. This was it. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built from the ashes of my broken dreams, was about to be revealed. The lights dimmed. The conductor, a renowned maestro named Silverman, who'd conducted for every major orchestra in the world, stepped onto the stage. Then Emma walked out, and the atmosphere in the room immediately shifted. She wore a deep red gown that caught the stage lights like fire. Her hair was pulled back simply, her jewelry minimal. She looked like an artist rather than a performer, someone who'd come to share something important rather than show off. She sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. The audience fell silent. Silverman raised his baton, and my music filled the concert hall. The opening was deceptive. A single piano note, soft and questioning, joined by tentative strings. It sounded almost fragile, vulnerable. This was the before, the representation of who I'd been before everything fell apart. Then the orchestra swelled, dark and threatening, and the piano responded with increasing urgency. This was the abuse, the years of psychological warfare, the mounting dread of living under constant attack. Emma played it with visceral intensity, her whole body engaged in translating emotion into sound. The moment of the break, when the arm shatters, was represented by a violent discord, piano and orchestra crashing together in deliberate chaos. I saw people in the audience actually flinch, then silence. Complete, devastating silence. Emma's hands hovered over the keys, and the audience held its collective breath. The next section was the recovery, slow, painful, building note by note, like learning to function again after trauma. The melody was simple at first, almost childlike, then growing in complexity as confidence returned. This was me discovering composition, finding a new way to make music, rebuilding myself from nothing. I watched Vivian's face from across the auditorium. She was leaning forward in her seat, her expression confused. She recognized some of these melodic fragments. They were variations on things I'd played years ago, pieces I'd created before the accident, but transformed, matured, woven into something far more sophisticated than my childhood compositions. The final movement was the triumph. The piano erupted in cascading runs while the orchestra built a foundation of pure ascending joy. This was victory, not over others but over circumstances. This was the phoenix rising from the ashes, transformed and transcendent. Emma played it with such ferocity and passion that I saw tears streaming down her face, but her fingers never faltered. The climax built and built, the entire orchestra and piano together in a wall of glorious sound that seemed to lift the roof off the building. Emma's hands flew across the keys, her face radiant with the sheer joy of performing something she believed in completely. Then, the resolution. The music didn't end triumphantly as the audience might have expected. Instead, it shifted into something bittersweet, a acknowledgement that victory doesn't erase pain, that success doesn't undo trauma. The final notes were the opening melody again, but transformed. No longer questioning, but accepting. No longer fragile, but tempered by fire. The last note rang out into perfect silence. For what felt like an eternity, no one moved. No one breathed. Then the audience exploded. The standing ovation was instantaneous and thunderous. People were crying, shouting, "Brava!" Emma stood and bowed, her own tears flowing freely. Silverman was beaming, gesturing to the orchestra and then to Emma. The applause didn't stop. It couldn't stop. I remained seated, watching it all with a sense of profound satisfaction. But I kept my eyes on Vivian. She was standing and clapping because everyone was standing and clapping. But her face was ashen. She was staring at Emma with an expression I'd never seen before. Not just hatred or jealousy, but genuine fear. She'd just witnessed the performance of the decade, maybe the generation, and it had happened immediately after her safe, competent, forgettable Beethoven. The comparison was devastating. Then Emma did something I hadn't anticipated. She held up her hand for silence, and somehow, impossibly, the audience quieted. "Thank you," she said, her voice amplified by the hall's perfect acoustics. "This piece, Phoenix Rising, is a world premiere by one of the most talented composers of our generation. It was written specifically for me by someone who understands the transformative power of music better than anyone I've ever met. Claire Hartwell, please stand up and take a bow." My heart stopped. I hadn't expected this. We'd discussed it, but Emma had said she'd only reveal the composer's name in the program notes, not during the actual performance. But here she was, calling me out in front of everyone. All eyes turned, scanning the audience for this mysterious composer. I had a choice: remain anonymous and safe, or step into the light and claim what was mine. I stood. The spotlight found me almost immediately. Someone in the tech booth was quick. I walked down the aisle toward the stage, my legs shaking, but my head held high. As I got closer to the front rows, I saw the moment my parents recognized me. My mother's mouth literally dropped open. My father blinked rapidly as if trying to reconcile the composed young woman walking toward the stage with the broken daughter he'd dismissed 3 years ago. And Vivian. God, Vivian's face was a study in slowly dawning horror. I climbed the stairs to the stage. Emma met me there and took my hand, raising it with hers as the audience applauded again. I bowed, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes on me, feeling the validation I'd been denied for so long. When the applause finally died down, Emma turned to me and said, loud enough for the microphones to catch, "Tell them about the piece. Tell them what inspired it." This was my moment. I could play it safe, give some generic artist's statement about transformation and resilience, or I could tell the truth. I chose truth. "This piece is autobiographical," I said, and my voice carried through the hall with surprising strength. "It tells the story of a young pianist who lost everything she'd worked for when her arm was broken right here in this building 3 years ago. She lost her ability to perform, lost her dreams, lost her place in her family. But she didn't lose herself. She found a new way to make music, a new way to matter, and she learned that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you. It's becoming so successful that they have to watch you shine while they fade into irrelevance." The audience was silent, absorbing this. Then someone started clapping, and others joined in, a different kind of applause now, not for entertainment, but for triumph, for survival, for refusing to be broken. I looked directly at Vivian. She was still standing, but she looked like she might collapse. Her face had gone from white to red, her hands clenched at her sides. She knew. Finally, she knew I knew what she'd done. And now everyone else did too. The aftermath was chaos. Critics surrounded Emma and me, asking questions about the piece, about my background, about future collaborations. My professors from NYU fought their way through the crowd, beaming with pride. Record label executives pressed business cards into my hands, and through it all I watched my family. My mother was in furious whispered conversation with my father. Vivian had disappeared immediately after my speech, practically fleeing the stage. I saw her manager following her, looking concerned. Finally, my parents approached me. The crowd parted for them. They looked important, and people assumed they were industry professionals. Claire, my mother said, and her voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. We need to talk, privately. No, I said simply, "Ba. Anything you have to say to me, you can say here." Her eyes flashed. Don't be dramatic, this isn't the place. This is exactly the place, I interrupted. This is where Vivian broke my arm. This is where she ended my performance career. This is where I'm starting my new one. So, yes, Mother, this is exactly the place. People around us had gone quiet, listening unabashedly. My mother was aware of the audience, and it made her uncomfortable. That was an accident, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. It wasn't, and you know it. You've always known it. You just didn't care because it was easier to have one star daughter than two. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, and it came out harsh. You want to talk about fair? You spent my entire childhood telling me I wasn't good enough. You watched Vivian sabotage me again and again and did nothing. And when she finally broke my arm and destroyed my ability to perform, you didn't even visit me in the hospital. You were too busy managing her career. My father stepped forward. Catherine? Is it Catherine? You're making a scene. Claire, I said coldly. My name is Claire. It's always been Claire. And I'm not making a scene. I'm telling the truth. Something this family has never been very good at. If you're trying to ruin your sister's reputation out of jealousy, I don't need to ruin Vivian's reputation. She's doing that perfectly well herself. Did you hear her performance tonight? It was competent, professional, completely forgettable. She's plateaued, and everyone in this room knows it. The truth of this hung in the air. My father's face reddened, but he couldn't argue. He'd sat through the same performance everyone else had. And now, I continued, everyone knows that the tragic sister who lost her performance career didn't just fade away. She became one of the most sought-after composers of her generation. She wrote a piece that will be performed in concert halls for decades. She won. You... My mother started, then stopped. Her eyes were wet, but I couldn't tell if it was from anger or something else. You could have told us. You could have shared this with us. Why? So you could take credit for it? So you could find a way to make it about Vivian? I built this career completely alone without any support from either of you. It's mine. It has nothing to do with this family. We're still your parents, Matthias, father said, and for the first time he sounded uncertain. Biologically, I agreed, but that's where it ends. You stopped being my parents the moment you chose Vivian over me. Every single time. Emma appeared at my elbow, her presence supportive but not intrusive. Claire, the reception is starting. Are you ready? Yes, I said, grateful for the escape. I turned back to my parents. I'm going to say this once, clearly, so there's no misunderstanding. I don't want your money, I don't want your approval, and I don't want a relationship with you. I've built a life without you, and it's a good life. A better life than I ever had in your house. Stay out of it. I walked away with Emma, leaving them standing in the crowd, looking small and lost. The reception was held in the Westwood Center's Grand Ballroom, the same room where they'd held the reception after Vivian's big win 3 years ago. I'd watched it from my hospital bed via shaky smartphone footage posted by attendees. Now I was here, the guest of honor, surrounded by people who actually cared about my work. Vivian was there, backed into a corner by her manager and a group of critics. I caught snippets of their conversation as I passed. Technically flawless, of course, but we need to talk about finding material that challenges you more emotionally. Younger performers are taking more risks, and the audience responds to that authenticity. Might be time to consider expanding your repertoire, maybe some contemporary pieces. She looked miserable, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, just a distant sort of acknowledgement that this was what she'd built for herself. Then she saw me. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, we were just two sisters again, the way we'd been before everything went wrong, before the jealousy and the cruelty and the broken bones. She broke the gaze first, turning away to say something to her manager. I didn't try to approach her. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I spent the evening networking with people who mattered: conductors who wanted to commission pieces, performers interested in collaborating, critics who wanted to interview me. Emma stayed by my side, introducing me to everyone she knew, being the friend and ally I'd needed for so long. At one point, a distinguished older man approached me. He had the bearing of someone important, and when he introduced himself, I understood why. Martin Blackwell, director of the Juilliard School. Ms. Hartwell, he said warmly, that was an extraordinary piece. I understand you're currently at NYU? Yes, sir. I'm finishing my senior year. Have you considered graduate school? Juilliard has an excellent composition program. We'd be very interested in having you. Juilliard, the school I dreamed of attending as a performer. The dream Vivian had stolen from me. And now they were offering it to me anyway, on my own terms. I'll definitely consider it, I said, keeping my voice professional even as my heart raced. Thank you. We'll be in touch, he said, handing me his card. I think you have a very bright future ahead of you, Ms. Hartwell. After he walked away, Emma squeezed my hand. Did that just happen? I think so. You're going to Juilliard. Maybe. Definitely, she said firmly. Claire, do you understand what you've done tonight? You didn't just perform a great piece, you announced yourself. You're going to be one of the defining composers of our generation. Everyone in this room knows it. I looked around the ballroom at the critics and performers and industry people, all of whom wanted to talk to me, wanted to be part of whatever I did next. I thought about my parents, probably at home now, having awkward conversations about the daughter they'd overlooked. I thought about Vivian, her carefully constructed career starting to crack. And I thought about the 15-year-old girl in a hospital bed, arm shattered, dreams destroyed, who'd sworn that this wouldn't be the end of her story. I need some air, I said. Emma nodded understandingly. I'll handle the crowd. Take your time. I slipped out of the ballroom and found my way back to the main concert hall. It was empty now, dark except for the ghost lights on stage. I walked down the aisle, my footsteps echoing, and climbed onto the stage. The piano was still there, the same Steinway grand that Emma had played my concerto on. I sat on the bench and looked out at the empty seats, imagining them filled with people who'd come to hear my music. I placed my hands on the keys. My right hand was weaker than my left, the fine motor control still compromised after 3 years. I'd never be able to perform professionally. That door was closed forever. But I could still play, just a little, just for myself. I started the opening theme of Phoenix Rising, just the melody line, simple and unadorned. My fingers stumbled over the keys, the notes imperfect and hesitant. But it was my music, and I was playing it in the place where I'd lost everything and gained everything. I thought about what Emma had asked me once. Was this revenge? And I'd said partially, but the truth was more complicated than that. This wasn't revenge. Revenge would have been destroying Vivian, ruining her career, making her suffer the way she'd made me suffer. But I hadn't done that. I'd simply succeeded so completely in my own right that her actions became irrelevant. She'd broken my arm, but not my spirit. She'd ended my performance career, but sparked my composition career. She'd tried to make me nothing, and instead, she'd forced me to become everything. In trying to destroy me, she'd created her own competition, and she'd lost. That wasn't revenge. That was justice. The months after the gala were a whirlwind. Phoenix Rising became the most talked about new work of the season. Recordings of Emma's performance went viral on classical music social media. Critics called it the defining composition of the new generation and a masterwork of contemporary classical music. I finished my senior year at NYU with honors and a portfolio of work that could have gotten me into any graduate program in the world. I chose Juilliard because some dreams don't die, they just evolve. Emma and I continued our collaboration. She commissioned 2 more pieces from me, and we performed them to sold-out audiences across the country. She became the primary interpreter of my piano works, and critics started calling us one of the great composer-performer partnerships of the era. I signed with a major publishing company. My music was licensed for films, television, and commercials. I won composition prizes and got commissions from prestigious orchestras and ensembles. By the time I was 23, I'd made more money from my music than Vivian had made from her entire performance career. But the most satisfying victory came 2 years after the gala. Vivian's career had continued its slow decline. She was still performing, still technically proficient, but the buzz had moved on. Younger performers were getting the prestigious engagements she used to book. Critics mentioned her less frequently, and when they did, it was with a sort of nostalgic fondness. Remember when she was the next big thing? She'd become exactly what she'd once mocked me for, respectable but forgettable. Then I heard through the music world grapevine that she was struggling financially. Concert fees weren't what they used to be, and she'd spent extravagantly during her peak years, assuming the income would last forever. She'd invested poorly, trusted the wrong managers, and now she was having trouble paying for the lifestyle she'd built. I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. When I opened it, my hands started shaking. Dear Claire, I know I have no right to contact you. I know you probably hate me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness or your help. But I'm desperate, and you're the only person who might understand. My career is falling apart. I'm losing engagements, losing money, losing everything I worked for, and I realized something. I never actually worked for it. It was handed to me because I could play notes perfectly, but I never understood music the way you do. I never felt it. I just performed it. You were the real artist. You always were. And I hated you for it. I hated you so much that I broke your arm because I couldn't stand the thought of you being better than me. I destroyed your dream because I was terrified you'd eclipse me, and you did anyway. You became everything I pretended to be. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for help. You're writing the music everyone wants to perform now. You're the composer everyone's talking about. I need a piece, Claire. Something that could revitalize my career, show that I can evolve as an artist. I'll pay whatever you ask. I'll give you anything. Please. Vivian. I read the email 3 times. Each time I felt less and less. She wanted me to save her career, the career she'd built by destroying mine. She wanted me to give her the artistic credibility she'd never earned, to hand her the success that I'd fought and bled and rebuilt myself to achieve. She wanted me to be her victim one more time. I drafted several responses. Some were cruel, throwing her words back at her with interest. Some were kind, explaining that I couldn't help her but wishing her well. Some were businesslike, politely declining without explanation. In the end, I settled on the simplest truth. Vivian, no die Claire. I hit send and blocked her email address. That night, I sat at my own piano, in my own apartment in New York, surrounded by the life I'd built, and I composed. Not because I had to, not because anyone had commissioned the work, but because I wanted to, because I loved it, because this was who I was. The music that came out wasn't angry or vengeful. It was peaceful, resolved, whole. It was the music of someone who'd won not by destroying her enemy, but by becoming so successful that her enemy became irrelevant. I called it After the Fall. 3 years later, I was at Lincoln Center for the premiere of my first full orchestral symphony. It was being performed by the New York Philharmonic, conducted by one of the most respected maestros in the world. Emma was performing the piano concerto that opened the evening. The hall was sold out, and there was a waiting list for returns. I was 26 years old and at the peak of my career. Backstage before the performance, I checked my phone and saw a notification from a music news website. The headline read, Vivian Hartwell announces retirement from performance career. I clicked the article. It was short, just a press release. Vivian was retiring from performing to pursue other interests. She thanked her fans and teachers and family. There was no mention of where she'd go or what she'd do next. She'd faded out not with drama, but with a whimper, exactly as I'd known she would. The girl who'd been called the future of classical piano at 16 was retired and forgotten at 28. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity. Just a distant acknowledgement that this chapter was closed. Emma found me in the green room, already in her performance gown. You okay? Yeah, I said, and meant it. I'm perfect. Good, because we're about to blow the roof off this place. She was right. The performance was transcendent. The audience gave us a 10-minute standing ovation. Critics called the symphony a masterwork and proof that classical music has a vibrant future. I took my bows on stage, looking out at the sea of faces, and felt complete. After the performance, during the reception, a young woman approached me hesitantly. She was maybe 18 with nervous eyes and calloused fingers that marked her as a baated pianist. Ms. Hartwell, I'm sorry to bother you, but I had to tell you something. I heard Phoenix Rising when I was 15, right after I'd broken my wrist in a gymnastics accident. I thought my music career was over. But your piece and your story made me realize I could still create music even if I couldn't perform it the way I'd planned. I'm a composition student at Manhattan School of Music now. You saved my life. I looked at this girl, seeing myself in her. The desperation, the fear, the determination to survive despite everything. What's your name? I asked. Sarah Kim. Sarah, can I give you some advice? She nodded eagerly. Whatever trauma brought you here, whatever loss you're rebuilding from, use it. Transform it. Let it fuel your work, but not define it. You're not the girl with the broken wrist. You're Sarah Kim, the composer. Don't ever forget the difference. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you. After she walked away, Emma sidled up beside me. You know you're officially a role model now, right? There are going to be dozens of Sarah Kims, all looking up to you. Good, I said. Maybe I can help them avoid some of the pain I went through. You're not still thinking about Vivian, are you? No, I said honestly. I'm thinking about what happens next. I have 3 more commissions lined up, and the Met Opera wants to talk about a potential opera commission. I'm thinking about which projects will challenge me most, which ones will let me grow. Not revenge? Not revenge, I confirmed. That's done. I won. She lost. The story's over. Is it, though? Emma asked. Because she contacted you again, didn't she? I saw your face when you were checking your phone earlier. She announced her retirement. And? And nothing. She's not my problem anymore. She's not my responsibility. She's just a person who made terrible choices and has to live with the consequences. I have my own life to live. Emma raised her champagne glass. To living well is the best revenge. I clinked my glass against hers. To living well as its own reward. 5 years after that night at the Westwood Gala, I was back in California for a master class at the San Francisco Conservatory. I was 31 now, an established composer with a catalog of works performed worldwide. I'd won every major composition prize, had pieces performed by every major orchestra. I'd achieved everything I'd ever dreamed of and more. The master class was being held at, where else? The Westwood Performing Arts Center, now renovated and modernized but still recognizable as the place where my life had changed forever. I stood on that stage, looking out at a room full of young composers and told them about my journey. Not just the triumph, but the trauma. Not just the success, but the struggle. I told them about having a dream destroyed and building a new one from the rubble. During the Q&A, a young man raised his hand. Ms. Hartwell, there are rumors about your relationship with your sister, the pianist Vivian Hartwell. Can you comment on that? I could have deflected. Could have said it was personal. But these students deserved honesty. My sister and I don't have a relationship, I said clearly. She made choices that hurt me deeply, and I chose not to allow her continued presence in my life. It's not dramatic, it's not ongoing. It's just a boundary I set for my own well-being. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. Do you think what happened to you, the injury, the end of your performance career, was ultimately a good thing? I thought about this carefully. No, what happened to me was traumatic and unjust. I would have been happy as a performer, and I mourn the loss of that possibility. But I've also built a life and career I love deeply. So it's not that the trauma was good, it's that I refused to let it be the end. I chose to transform it into fuel for something new. The success isn't because of the trauma, it's in spite of it. After the class, I walked through the building alone, revisiting the places that had defined my story. The main concert hall where I'd watched Emma perform Phoenix Rising and reclaimed my narrative. The hallways I'd walked as a teenager, full of dreams and naive trust. And finally, the third-floor practice room where Vivian had broken my arm. It had been completely renovated, modernized with new flooring and windows and equipment. Nothing remained of the room as it had been that day. But I stood in the doorway anyway, looking at the spot where my old life had ended. "Goodbye," I whispered. Not to Vivian, not to my family, not even to the dream I'd lost, but to the girl who'd been destroyed here, to Claire Hartwell, age 15, talented pianist, victim. She'd done her job, she'd survived, she'd transformed, she'd won. Now it was time for Claire Hartwell, age 31, renowned composer, survivor, to live her life without looking back. I turned away from the practice room and walked out of the Westwood Performing Arts Center for the last time. I had a flight to catch. The London Symphony Orchestra was premiering my new work next week, and there was a documentary crew following the process. My phone buzzed with messages from Emma, my agent, my publisher, my students, my friends, all the people who made up my real family, the one I'd chosen rather than the one I'd been born into. I didn't look back as I drove away. There was nothing behind me but ghosts and old pain. Everything that mattered was ahead.